The world trembled, the skies darkened, and the air grew heavy with an ominous silence. Nature itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the inevitable. The land of Israel, once fertile and bursting with life, was gripped by a devastating drought. The once lush fields where crops swayed in the gentle breeze, now lay barren and cracked under the relentless sun. The sun, usually a source of life and warmth, beat down mercilessly, scorching the earth and withering crops. Day after day, the relentless heat drained the land of its vitality, leaving behind a desolate wasteland. Rivers dwindled to mere trickles, their beds cracked and barren. The life-giving waters that once nourished the land had all but vanished, leaving behind a parched and thirsty earth. The people were desperate. Their cries for rain went unanswered. They looked to the heavens, their eyes filled with hope and despair, but the skies remained unyielding, offering no relief. Their prayers seemed lost in the dust-filled air. The once vibrant communities were now shadows of their former selves, their spirits as dry and cracked as the land they lived on. This was a time of spiritual drought as well. The temples, once filled with the sounds of worship and devotion, now stood empty and desolate, echoing the spiritual barrenness of the people. The Israelites, chosen people of Allah, had strayed from His path. They had turned their backs on the teachings that once guided them, seeking solace in false promises and empty rituals. They had turned away from the one true God and embraced the worship of idols, false deities that promised prosperity but delivered only despair. The allure of these idols had led them astray, deepening their spiritual crisis. The ruler of Israel, King Ahab, had succumbed to the influence of his wife, Jezebel, a fervent devotee of the Canaanite god Baal. Together, they had steered the nation away from the worship of Allah, leading them into deeper darkness. Together, they led the Israelites further into idolatry, erecting temples to Baal, and persecuting the followers of Allah. The land was filled with the sounds of false worship, drowning out the true call to faith. It was in this time of crisis, both physical and spiritual, that Allah sent forth His prophet Elijah to guide His people back to the straight path. Elijah, a beacon of hope in a time of despair, was chosen to lead the people back to righteousness. Elijah's mission was a daunting one, to confront a corrupt king, challenge powerful priests, and awaken the dormant faith of a people lost in darkness. He was tasked with the monumental challenge of rekindling the flame of true worship in the hearts of the Israelites. His journey would be fraught with danger and hardship, but Elijah, armed with unwavering faith in Allah, was prepared to face any challenge that lay ahead. He knew that the path would be treacherous, but his resolve was unshakable. He knew that his duty was to deliver Allah's message, no matter the cost. With a heart full of faith and a spirit unyielding, Elijah set forth on his mission, ready to bring light to a land shrouded in darkness. Elijah, a man of simple origins but extraordinary courage, emerged from the wilderness, his heart ablaze with divine purpose. He was not born into a family of prophets or priests, nor did he possess any formal training in religious matters. Yet his conviction and faith were unshakable, and his mission was clear. He was chosen by Allah to lead His people back to the path of righteousness, to remind them of their covenant with the Almighty. His name, meaning "My God is Yahweh," was a testament to his unwavering faith. It was a name that carried weight and significance, a constant reminder of his divine mission. Elijah's very identity was intertwined with his purpose, and he wore it like a badge of honor. He was a stark figure against the backdrop of despair, his presence radiating an aura of authority that commanded attention. His eyes burned with a fervor that could not be ignored, and his voice carried the weight of divine truth. Wherever he went, people could not help but stop and listen, drawn to the power and conviction in his words. Elijah's message was clear and uncompromising. There is no God but Allah, and He alone is worthy of worship. He spoke with a passion that left no room for doubt, challenging the people to abandon their false gods and return to the worship of the one true God. His words were a call to action, a plea for repentance and renewal. He condemned the worship of idols as a grave sin, a betrayal of Allah's covenant with His chosen people. The idols, he declared, were nothing but lifeless statues, powerless and unworthy of reverence. By worshipping them, the Israelites were turning their backs on the very God who had delivered them from bondage, and blessed them with a land of their own. He warned of Allah's wrath if the Israelites did not repent and return to the path of righteousness. His warnings were dire and urgent, painting a vivid picture of the consequences of their disobedience. He spoke of droughts, famines, and invasions, all as manifestations of divine judgment. Yet his message was not one of despair but of hope. For he also spoke of the mercy and forgiveness that awaited those who turned back to Allah with sincere hearts. His words were like thunder in the ears of the complacent Israelites. They reverberated through the land, shaking the people from their spiritual slumber. Elijah's voice was a clarion call, a wake-up call to a nation that had lost its way. His intensity and passion were impossible to ignore, and his message left a lasting impact on all who heard it. He reminded them of their glorious past, of their ancestors who had worshipped Allah alone and were rewarded with his blessings. He spoke of the great patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who had walked in faith and obedience. He recounted the miracles and deliverances that had marked their history, urging the people to reclaim their heritage and renew their commitment to Allah. He spoke of the covenant, the sacred promise between Allah and his people, and how they had broken it through their idolatry. The covenant was a bond of love and loyalty, a divine agreement that required faithfulness and devotion. By turning to idols, the Israelites had violated this sacred trust, and Elijah called them to account for their actions. Elijah's appearance sent shockwaves through the kingdom. His presence was a challenge to the status quo, a direct confrontation with the powers that be. The very foundations of the society were shaken as people began to question their beliefs and practices. The prophet's words ignited a spark of change, a movement that could not be easily contained. His words resonated with a small but faithful remnant who had clung to the worship of Allah. These were the true believers, the ones who had not bowed to the idols or compromised their faith. They saw in Elijah a kindred spirit, a leader who spoke the truth they held dear. Together, they formed a community of faith, standing firm against the tide of idolatry. They saw in him a beacon of hope, a champion of truth against the tide of falsehood. Elijah's courage and conviction inspired them to stand strong in their faith, to resist the pressures of the society around them. He was a guiding light in a time of darkness, a symbol of the enduring power of faith and truth. But his message was met with fierce opposition from King Ahab, Queen Jezebel, and the powerful priests of Baal. These were the leaders who had led the people astray, who had promoted the worship of idols and persecuted the true believers. They saw Elijah as a threat to their power and influence, and they were determined to silence him. They refused to relinquish their hold on the people, fearing the loss of their influence and power. The confrontation between Elijah and the royal court was a battle of wills, a clash between truth and falsehood. It was a struggle that would shape the future of the nation, a test of faith and courage that would leave a lasting legacy. Faced with unwavering resistance, Elijah proposed a dramatic test to prove the powerlessness of Baal and the might of Allah. He challenged the priests of Baal to a contest on Mount Carmel, a place of natural grandeur that had become a site of pagan worship. The challenge was simple, yet profound. Each side would prepare a sacrifice, a bullock laid upon an altar of wood. The priests of Baal would call upon their god to send fire from heaven to consume the offering. Elijah would then call upon Allah to do the same. The God who answered with fire would be declared the one true God. The stage was set for a confrontation of cosmic proportions, a clash between faith and falsehood, between the worship of the Creator and the allure of false idols. The people, their hearts filled with a mixture of fear and anticipation, gathered on the slopes of Mount Carmel to witness this momentous event. The priests of Baal, confident in their rituals and incantations, went first. They believed that their elaborate ceremonies and fervent prayers would surely summon their god to answer them. They danced around their altar, their voices rising in a frenzy of chanting and supplication. The air was thick with the sound of their desperate cries, each one more intense than the last, as they sought to invoke the presence of Baal. They cried out to Baal from morning until noon, but their pleas were met with only silence. The sun climbed higher in the sky, and still there was no response. Their voices grew hoarse, their bodies weary, but they did not relent. The heavens remained closed, the air heavy with anticipation. Dark clouds loomed overhead, but no rain fell, and no fire descended. The tension was palpable, as if the very earth held its breath, waiting for a sign. Elijah, observing their futile efforts, mocked them, his words laced with irony. "Shout louder!" he taunted. "Surely he is a god! Perhaps he is deep in thought, or busy, or traveling. Maybe he is sleeping and must be awakened." He challenged them to call louder, suggesting that perhaps Baal was asleep or away on a journey. His voice cut through the din of their cries, a sharp reminder of their impotence. His taunts were met with increasing desperation from the priests, who resorted to self-mutilation in a desperate attempt to appease their god. They slashed themselves with swords and spears, their blood mingling with the dust, a grim testament to their fervor. As the sun began its descent, Elijah gathered the people close. The day was waning, and the time for decisive action had come. He called them to witness what was about to unfold, to see the power of the true God. He repaired the altar of Allah, which had fallen into disrepair, symbolizing the broken covenant between Allah and his people. Stone by stone, he rebuilt it, each piece a reminder of the faith that had once been strong and unyielding. He laid the bullock upon the wood, and in a gesture of profound faith, ordered that the offering be drenched with water, not once but 3 times, until the trenches around the altar overflowed. The water soaked the wood and the sacrifice, making it clear that no ordinary fire could consume it. Then, turning his face towards heaven, Elijah raised his hands and uttered a simple, heartfelt prayer to Allah, acknowledging his power and beseeching him to reveal his glory to his people. His voice was calm and steady, a stark contrast to the frantic cries of the priests of Baal. "O Allah," he prayed, "let it be known this day that you are God in Israel and that I am your servant. Answer me, O Lord, answer me, so these people will know that you, O Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again."